Christian confidence in chaotic times, which is what's going on in our country and yours too in a different way, you would have noticed that now the ANC is the African National Congress. They're the communist terrorist group that runs our country. They were listed by your State Department and the CIA as a terrorist organization, and yet your State Department under Bill Clinton worked very hard to betray South Africa and bully South Africa into handing over to these very same low-life, mass-murdering scumbags who are now running the country. 2 Peter 2 verse 19, you could write across a lot of political movements. While they promise them liberty, they themselves are servants of corruption. And they are certainly corrupt as anything. So we have state-operated enterprise, SOEs, and every one of them is failing. Eskom's our electricity provider, and the government has stolen 241 billion out of that, and we have power failures. We pay a fortune for electricity, and yet you can go 3, 4, 5, 6, 12 hours a day without electricity. Now imagine running a business where suddenly the lights suddenly go out and your food's ruined, your customers lost, and next thing, every business in town needs their own generator, needs their own backup, uninterrupted power supply, generators, extra batteries, solar panels, and it's called bring your own infrastructure. The water often doesn't flow. Everything to do with the plumbing gone. Now we've got to shower with buckets of water, stand in a bucket of water to try and collect some, and you take that bucket of water and use that to fill the cistern, the toilet, and try to reuse water. You unconnect the drainage underneath your sink so that whatever water you wash your hands with goes into a bucket that you can then reuse for other things. The dishwashing or clothes washing water, we make sure it goes into gardens so that the plants don't die. And in our home and mission, we've now dug a borehole so that we can survive. We have 5,000 litre tanks gathering water from our roof. Any rainwater gets drained in so that we can have extra supplies. We walk around with buckets of water because you can't expect a modern government today to supply electricity and water, can you? You pay for it, but you don't get it. And then everything else, our Transnet, everything to do with transport, total failure. Do you know they've got squatter camps growing on the railways? Railway lines, railways can't move because there's squatter shanties built over the railway line. Can you imagine anything like that? It's insane. Our post office doesn't work. It hasn't worked in years. We used to send out massive mailings. We used to survive by selling books and posting them around the world. The Southern Post Office, totally defunct. Why? BBBEE, broad-based black economic empowerment, cadre deployment, jobs for pals, giving comrades jobs. Now, they have the job, but they don't want to do the work. So government is so corrupt, everything they take, South African Airways, totally defunct, finished. Used to be one of the best airlines in the world. So everything that the South African government, the ANC, runs is corrupt and is a failure. So it's worked out that they steal 1/4 of the GDP every year. That's an African Union statistic. So 1/4 of the gross domestic product of South Africa is stolen by our government every year in corruption. Corruption is killing us. And we had the president of South Africa say corruption doesn't hurt anyone. I thought corruption hurts absolutely everyone. Now, our president, Cyril Ramaphosa, who came to the White House to meet your president, is a senior member of the South African Communist Party. If you go onto the Communist Party of South Africa, CPSA website, you will find we're not putting up a candidate in the next elections, but advise all cadres to vote for the ANC candidate. The South African Communist Party controls the ANC to such an extent. Every president of the ANC and president of South Africa has been a senior Politburo member of the ANC, starting with Nelson Mandela. By the way, if you want to amuse yourself, go onto Communist Party USA website. And they also sell Lenin and Karl Marx baseball caps and T-shirts, credit cards accepted. And they say the Communist Party USA is not putting up a candidate in the next election, but advises all cadres to vote for the Democratic Party candidate. Now, what does that tell you? Who controls the Democratic Party in America? Well, the Communist Party tells you on their own website they're not putting up a candidate, just vote for the Democratic Party. So after President Donald Trump had video footage screened of the chilling, blatant incitements to violence and genocide by the EFF leader and the Member of Parliament, Julius Malema, with his public calls to kill the Boer, shoot the farmer, cut the throats of whiteness, seize the land, Ramaphosa, our president sitting there, when I say our, I'm speaking very broadly, not my president, but anyway, he claims he opposed and condemned this hate speech. Then he got back to South Africa and said, Donald Trump can't tell us what to do. We stand by this and we support this. No, he lied to your president's face that he opposed it. He never has opposed it. When has Ramaphosa ever spoken against this kind of genocidal hate speech? He's a senior member of the Southern Communist Party, which could have been brought out in the Oval Office too. But in his inaugural presidential speech in 2018, Ramaphosa boldly announced his intention to expropriate farms without compensation. He said, we're going to take the land from the whites and we're going to give them to our people. In other words, the whites are not our people. And I've even been in Communist Party meetings where they said the people will govern. I said, well, I'm a person. They said, no, you're not. Did you know you're not a person? When they say the people, they mean the members of the Communist Party. But when they speak about members of the Communist Party, it's not the members of the Communist Party who decide, it's the Politburo who decides. So when they say the people will govern, they basically mean the Politburo, the Central Committee decides. So, interesting. He emphasized we're going to confiscate farms without compensation, emphasizing the without compensation part, to rousing applause and cheers in the parliament. That just tells you what you're dealing with. And I don't know if you noticed, most of the delegation didn't even bother to turn around and have the decency to look at it. And this one silly character in the middle there is just smirking and laughing the whole time. I don't know if you watched it. Everyone in South Africa did. And we were so thrilled when Donald Trump produced evidence. He didn't bother to argue the point. He showed video evidence and then he produced newspaper cutting evidence of the genocide and mass murders. Now, I don't know if the audio is going to work here, but let's try it. So, this is
there's nothing you can do. There's nothing this parliament can do. With or without you, people are going to occupy land.
Keep the poor! Keep the poor! Keep the poor! Non-Conto Alliance. Shoot to kill. Kamaza. Kill the poor. The farmer. Kill the poor. The farmer. Brr, pa. Pa. Brr, pa. Pa.
Attention, you are saying enough is enough. We are taking the future into our own hands. Indians,
10% of the country votes for these idiots.
Majority of Indians are racist. The white minority which took our land by force. You must say enough is enough. We are taking the future into our own hands.
Now I know that your president showed this in the Oval Office, but I don't think any national program in America focused on it. It was just like in the sideline. They didn't get to see fully.
South Africa, stand and make sure that our people understand that they need to be counted. You must be counted. You must be part of history. You must make sure that you are one of the people who are going to deliver economic freedom in our lifetime. Freedom in our lifetime. Amanda!
What he's saying is Amanda. Amanda means power. And now, these are some of the crosses representing the farmers who have been murdered so far in this genocide. They've each got names and dates on these. So, genocide begins with dehumanizing your target. Then you demonize the target. Then you discriminate against them, you disarm them, and finally you destroy them. And I saw this in Rwanda. I've documented the Holocaust in Rwanda. The Rwandan Holocaust began with singing songs about the Inyenzis. Inyenzis means cockroaches. They called the Tutsi minority tribe the Inyenzis, the cockroaches. It started with jokes and songs about killing the Tutsi minority, and it ended up with wiping out 1.1 million people with machetes. So President Cyril Ramaphosa was being less than honest, to be polite, in the Oval Office. He claimed the ANC government is not planning to take away anyone's property, and he is not supporting racist laws discriminating against white people in South Africa. But actually, there's more than 140 racist anti-white laws in ANC-ruled South Africa. So, personal example, my first two daughters were born under apartheid. You can't find their race in their birth certificates. They're born 1991, 1993. My sons were born free, as they're called. They were born under Mandela in post-apartheid South Africa. Their birth certificates has their race clearly listed. Mandela didn't abolish apartheid, he brought it back for the purpose of broad-based black economic empowerment, affirmative action. My sons have experienced, they're too male, they're too pale. They can't get on a team, they can't get this and that. They have no chance of getting jobs in the country. That's why most South Africans like me, their children and grandchildren are all over the world. Most South Africans my age have to go to Australia or New Zealand to visit their grandchildren. By God's grace, all my children and grandchildren are living in South Africa, in Cape Town. But that's the exception. ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa publicly insulted President Trump earlier this year, said, we don't need American aid, we don't need American trade, and he called American president a narcissist and a racist and a white supremacist and so on. But now he comes cap in hand to the White House wanting trade and investment. And he condemned the Afrikaans refugees who were welcomed into America as refugees. He called them cowards for running away from what he called problems. Problems is a nice name for genocidal mass murder and torture, but interesting term. Now, the infamous white people must be dealt with like a boiling a frog is something Cyril Ramaphosa said. And Dr. Mario Ambrosini, who I knew, he joined us for quite a few marches to Parliament. He, a very reliable man, wrote the book, The Prince and I, because he was the key advisor to Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, also a good friend of ours, a Zulu leader of the Inkatha Freedom Party. And so Mario Ambrosini wrote, in his brutal honesty, Ramaphosa told me in 1994 of the ANC's 25-year strategy to deal with whites. It'll be like boiling a frog alive. This is done by raising the temperature slowly. Being cold-blooded, the frog doesn't notice the slow temperature increase. But if the temperature is raised suddenly, the frog will jump out the water. He said the black majority will pass laws transferring the wealth, the land, and the economic power from the whites to the blacks slowly, incrementally, until the whites lost all that they had in South Africa, but without taking too much from them at any given time to cause them to resist or fight. So the same Ramaphosa came to America and sat in the Oval Office. This is what he said. He's on the record for. So what are you to make of this? Well, we're entering into the second phase of the revolution. Every revolution has two phases. The first phase is political control. The second phase is economic, cultural, everything control. So you can see in the Soviet Union, they went from the revolution of 1917 to dekulakization, taking the farms, imprisoning the people. 1920s, you saw millions killed in Ukraine as a result of the dekulakization. Same thing with China. The Cultural Revolution was the second phase of the revolution. So the second phase of the revolution is when you move from political control to economic and everything control. And for that, the EFF, the Everything for Free Party, they were started as the second phase of the revolution, vanguard of the revolution. So this genocidal maniac you saw on the screen there singing, kill the Boer, kill the farmer, he was the youth league leader of the ANC. And the very year, 2013, they accepted the second phase of the revolution. He left the ANC and started the EFF party, which on the website says it's a Marxist revolutionary party. So they call themselves communists as well. The EFF's a deception operation. They are working as part of the ANC. It's sort of like, when you get somebody who's ex-special forces, and then they go and they start doing, well, many times they're not. They're just on assignment, and they're doing a job for them. So the communists do that too. Here they've got an ex-ANC member who's running an opposition party, but they work together, and they vote for the same legislation. It's vanguard of the revolution, plausible deniability. In his meeting with your American president in the Oval Office, President Ramaphosa pretended to be an innocent, helpless bystander. Yes, there's some shocking systematic targeting, there's scapegoating, dehumanizing, demonizing, torturing to death of thousands of Afrikaans farmers. But this demonic slaughter and torture of farmers was just dismissed as a result of unemployment. Now, I think you had unemployment in America in the 1930s. I don't think you had farmers being tortured to death like this, and kids being drowned in boiling water, and people being raped with broken glass bottles, and all kinds of hideous things, taking irons and ironing out people's skin because they've got white skin. You know, I don't think you had unemployment in America didn't lead to genocidal lunacy. So unemployment is definitely not the cause, but it's his own government's fault that there's unemployment. When Mandela was given the country, we had 2 million unemployed in South Africa. Now, 2 million unemployed was considered a catastrophic crisis, a disaster, but it was a result of their policies of disinvestment, no education before liberation, and disinvestment from South Africa, sanctions. And so the ANC's policy, they burned thousands of schools, by the way, in the so-called liberation struggle, to ensure that their kids didn't have access to schools. And they have chased away employers and investors with their BBBEE corruption and all of the nonsense of the government, the racist laws. They've chased away so many investors. We've got a couple of million people who've left South Africa who were employers and investors. And for everyone who left, that's 10 more people left unemployed. Every year the ANC's been in power since 1994, the number of unemployeds increased by 1 million. So we now have more than 34 million unemployed in South Africa. That's totally the fault of the ANC government. They chasing away investors. Even Elon Musk wanted to bring Starlink to South Africa, but he'd have to give 40% of his shares away, give it away, not sell it, give it away, to a person of the choice of the ANC government, who would be one of their communist cadres. So for them to literally blame unemployment for this mass murder is ridiculous, because that's their fault too. And facts are stubborn things. The ANC South African delegation blamed foreign illegal aliens on the farm attacks, even though Ernst Roets, a friend of ours, wrote in his book, Kill the Boer, Government Complicity in the Brutal Farm Murders. The government is involved on many levels with the farm murders, including protecting the attackers, refusing to prosecute those responsible, and even members of the security forces have been found involved in these farm attacks. When they've captured a farm attacker, they've often had to let them go because he's a senior member of the National Intelligence Service, which is our CIA basically, or senior member of the South African National Defence Force, or a senior policeman. And so the government refuses to prosecute these people, and for them to say, you know, we don't know and we can't help ourselves, and America must give us technology and we need drones and we need investment, that's just smoke trying to distract people from the real issue. And President Donald Trump quite correctly, pointedly asked President Ramaphosa, why don't you arrest Julius Malema for his obvious public hate speech, his genocidal violence against farmers? As he said, no one in America could stand up and say, could you stand up and say, kill the Mexicans, kill the teachers, or any other particular group of people without getting arrested? It's unthinkable. While the ANC delegation tried to manipulate the discussion to suggest the best way to deal with this was for America to give more investment into this country and more technology for the security forces, as though this is just a technical problem and an economic problem. It's not. It's a moral issue. It's a Marxist revolutionary strategy. Why should America place more money, more resources, into the hands of a provenly corrupt criminal government, hell-bent, literally hell-bent, on murdering innocent farmers in South Africa? The ANC delegation lied to the American president, they lied to the American people. Of course, they lie to the South African people every day. And the proof of this is not just in the Witkruyst Monument. The Witkruyst Monument is a hillside with 4,000 crosses with names and dates of when they were murdered. And it's been documented in the book, Kill the Boer. Notice the subtitle, Government Complicity in South African Brutal Farm Murders. And this year, Ramaphosa's government has enacted 3 pieces of legislation: Expropriation Without Compensation Bill, the Bella Bill, which is basic education law, where the government presumes that they can tell you what you can teach your kids in your private school, your home school, your church school, even in your home school, to prevent parents teaching their children Christianity or traditional family values or even in their home language, in their home, that a homeschooler is not allowed to train their kids in their own language. I mean, does this make any sense? Why would you make those laws? And then they've brought in legislation to try and disarm the private security companies. All initiated this year. Why would you do that unless you're planning genocide? We need a free and independent Cape of Good Hope to escape from the genocidal Marxist machinations of this cancer government. Now, I started Words Are Tools, and I started the practice years ago of writing cancer when I speak about the government, because the middle letters of cancer is A and C. So you put a small c, a capital A and C, and a small ER. The cancer government. Our government is a cancer. They're just breaking away, breaking down the body. A cancer is a cell that doesn't contribute to the health of the body. It breaks down the health of the body. And so they're a cancer government. They're looting and ruining our country. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who justify the wicked for a bribe, who take away justice from the righteous man. Remember, the ANC is in allegiance with the Southern Communist Party. Now, Malema says there are no white farmers being killed in South Africa, even though he's calling for it, and many of his people have been arrested killing people. And this is just one of many farmers who've been brutally murdered in recent days. White South African farmers are experiencing the highest rates of violence anywhere in the world. The most dangerous job in the world is not being a bomb disposal expert in a war zone like Iraq. Farmers in South Africa are being murdered at 4 times greater rate than even the police. And our police are facing exorbitant rates of violence. And Ramaphosa has actually blatantly said there are no murders of white farmers in South Africa. He said it, and yet we've got documentation of over 4,000. Here follows a compilation of quotes and policies from ANC leaders. All white people are criminals and should be treated as such. We need to take their property, deny them job opportunities, treat them as second-class citizens. Quote unquote, this is official public statements. White people are rapists, dogs and cowards. We need to sing songs about how they should be mowed down and murdered. White people are in a minority, and that means they must have fewer rights than the rest of us. Absolutely, that is how democracy works. And if they dare to protest against these views, we must tell them to keep their mouths shut because they are racist and they're simply getting what they deserve. So after Donald Trump dealt with Cyril Ramaphosa and ANC team in the Oval Office, the media in South Africa went ballistic. There is no genocide in South Africa, and they deserve it. Which is like these atheists say, there is no God and I hate him. You know, it's that kind of logic. So that's what they're having all around. There's no genocide, but they deserve it. When Freedom Front Member of Parliament Peter Groenewald, who's a friend, reported on the horrific tortures being inflicted on white farmers, an ANC member of Parliament jeered and shouted, "Bury them alive." And there was laughter and cheers all throughout Parliament while he's giving these serious reports about heart-rending tortures being forced on them. Destruction is in our midst. Oppression and deceit do not depart from its streets. Malema has posted, "I am the Messiah of our time. I will give free land to my people. Unlike Jesus or Nelson Mandela and his friends, I don't need to go to stupid prison to save my people," says Malema. Blasphemous lowlife. Here's Andile Maxitama, the Black Land First leader. "Every time I hear the name Jesus, I'm reminded of white people. I'm glad he won't come back, because if he comes back, we will kill him again and cremate his body." These are the kind of people we're dealing with. Here's a ANC government official who's posted, "We have no choice but to kill white babies, simply because they're going to grow up and oppress our babies. So we kill white babies. When the right time comes, we'll chop their heads off and they'll become headless white racists." I mean, this is posted. Would you have anyone in your government who could make a post like that and stay in office? Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who justify the wicked for a bribe and who take away justice from the righteous man. This is a bit of an old post, but it's an Afrikaner Genocide Watch museum where they document over 4,000 farmers murdered and 68,000 other white Afrikaners murdered since 1994. And when you think about the fact that we only have a community of about 26,000 white farmers anyway, 4,000 murdered amongst 26,000 is a huge impact. You've got 2 million farmers in America. Imagine if you had 500,000 farmers murdered. Would that make the news? There's a lot of documentation on the farm murders. Land of Sorrow is one of the books. Kill the Boer is the most comprehensive. It's brutal. It's got an age restriction reading it, and it's very hard, but it's an important contribution to debate. And it's sickening describing the scenes, where they often write in blood, death to all racists, or we're coming for you, we're going to kill you all, written on the walls in the people's blood. Feel it, it's war. It is war. Carmen van der Westhuizen was just one of the victims, stabbed 70 times. Another victim. And I prefer to show the picture of people as they were than of the actual crimes. But Carmen Mante, brutally murdered, axe-wielding assailant. This poor little girl, another one of the victims, which they laugh about. And Ati Potgieter was stabbed 151 times with a panga, garden fork, and knife. And his wife, Vilna, was also murdered. And their little child, Wilhelmina. Wilhelmina murdered as well at the same time. I mean, this is the reality. We're talking about families, individuals. These are some of the characters covered in the Kill the Boer book. If you know of Katie Hopkins, she's produced a video documentary, The Killing Fields, and Katie Hopkins' video is a heart-rending documentary to go through. There's also Farmlands, done by a Canadian girl, and I think it was also very effective. Farmlands and Killing Fields are the best documentaries probably out there at the moment. Amazing it's had to take foreigners to get the story. But this is what we're facing with. Huge, horrific attacks. So people are saying Donald Trump's giving fake news and overreacting, and it's not true. They have set in Parliament shockwaves in allowing change to the Constitution to expropriate the land without compensation. If you don't have respect for private property, you can't grow an economy. You're not going to get investors, and you're not going to attract employers. And they're following in the footsteps of failure. When Patrice Lumumba, the Soviets named their terrorist training school after him, here's the first communist dictator of the Congo. I should mention that back in 1960, Belgian Congo was a peaceful, stable, prosperous country. And President Eisenhower bullied the Belgians to get out of the Congo. And the Belgian government said, if we leave the Congo, it'll be chaos. And the American government said, it doesn't matter, you've got to leave. And it was US foreign policy to bully all of Europe to get out of Africa. And so 1960, you just saw waves of chaos, massacres, churches being burnt, huge amounts of murders of missionaries, whole congregations herd into churches, burnt down over them, as a result of US foreign policy. I mean, Dwight Eisenhower was devastating to Africa, the way he bullied. And what happened? Chaos, and into the vacuum when Europe pulled out of Africa was the Soviets, the Red Chinese, and the Americans. And it was a war zone. Millions of people died. Tens of millions of people died in Africa because of the decolonization which the United States bullied people in Africa into. Well, Patrice Lumumba nationalized everything. And there was just chaos. And Congo is still in chaos to this day. Failed state. The same thing, nationalization of industries in Zambia and Tanzania, economic collapse to countries that used to export food, starvation. And the majority of aid that poured into Africa was stolen by corruption anyway. Frelimo, when the Portuguese left Mozambique in 1975, the communists confiscated all private property, destroyed what had been a vibrant economy. They went from a country that was exporting food to a country that needed foreign aid, and they went to a place where they had 2 doctors in the entire country for 14 million people. Why would a doctor want to work in a communist country like that? This was a 5-star hotel, by the way. This was the Grand Hotel in Beira. It's not very grand since. Before independence, Mozambique exported food. After the revolution, 1 million Mozambicans died of starvation. And the country is torn apart by vicious civil war. My first mission field was Mozambique. And this is what can happen to countries that used to export food. When you confiscate land, when government gets involved, they've shown you, from Red China to the Soviet Union, they can destroy everything. Interestingly, when Zimbabwe was betrayed by the British, 1980, Mozambique's Samora Machel and Tanzania's Julius Nyerere actually warned Robert Mugabe, don't make the same mistakes we made. Respect property rights. Let the Europeans continue to contribute to the economy. Good advice. And Mugabe began threatening the white farmers, but the media said, you don't need to worry. Mugabe's an intelligent man. He's a well-educated man. He knows dispossessing the farmers will be a catastrophe for the country. Nobody's going to commit agricultural economic suicide, surely. But you underestimate the power of hatred and greed. And there's a demonic aspect to this too. Even though it destroyed Zimbabwe, even though it led to more than half the population of Zimbabwe fleeing, despite that, they still invaded and confiscated 5,500 commercial farms, just because the farmers were white. And today, devastation. And I could show you a lot of it. They evicted the white farmers, who in many cases were third or fourth generation citizens, who had literally carved these farms out of the wilderness. And even as the economy collapsed, more than half the population fled the country, which is a vote with your feet, a vote of no confidence in the country. When more than half of a population of a country flee, that's a pretty big vote of no confidence. But most African leaders cheered and applauded Robert Mugabe. And even the South African President Thabo Mbeki, who personally I think was our worst president we ever had, he is a hardcore doctrinaire Marxist. He tried to close all Christian schools. He tried to close all Christian radio stations. He tried to disarm us all. I marched thousands of people to Parliament to protest his policies and throw a spanner in the works. But he saw that South Africa bailed out Zimbabwe continually, even though Zimbabwe was completely bankrupt. And this is the end result of communist land reform. Just, horrific. And where's the dignity in the people in becoming starving beggars, dependent on foreign aid handouts? This is what these characters do. But there's a lot of money in foreign aid. And maybe some of you might be interested to read the book Lords of Poverty. It's about the corruption of the NGOs who make millions out of feeding the poor. You just can't believe what an industry it is to feed the poor. It reminds you of Judas, who got outraged at the lovely woman's gracious act of anointing Jesus with the perfume and said, why was this perfume not sold and the money given to the poor? And John's gospel said, Judas wasn't concerned for the poor. Judas wasn't charged with money bags, and Judas was a thief. Well, Judas is just the first of a long line of these creeps who use caring for the poor as a cover for massive corruption. And it's disgusting to see how kids are reduced down to picking through rubbish and trying to eke out a living in the mud. Yet in his opening State of the Nation address to Parliament, Cyril Ramaphosa announced, we will seize land without compensation, greeted with the loudest, most sustained applause of the address. This was a popular move. Now, considering South Africa provides sanctuary for more than 10 million refugees who fled the endemic misrule to the north, and if you imploded food security in South Africa, this will affect more than our own population, far more, because South Africa feeds a lot of other people too. In 1994, when Nelson Mandela became president of South Africa and was presented the superpower of Africa, we had 70,000 white commercial farmers who were feeding 100 million people in Africa, when our population was only 28 million. So we were feeding 4 times more than our own country's population. And by the way, that's still a big decrease. When I was born, we had 130,000 farmers in South Africa. Today, we have barely 28,000 farmers left. I think it's now 26,000. And they are feeding 40 million people, which is also impressive. But the population has doubled to more than 62 million. So we can't even feed a whole population now. And they're still attacking the farmers. Even as the population of the country has doubled, our food production is less than 40% what it was in 1994. The change is not always progress. And the food crisis in Africa is about to get much, much worse. And so will the refugee crisis. But that is a good news for the United Nations and the World Food Programme and UNESCO and all those other characters, because bigger business for them. War is a big business. Refugees are also a big business. Starvation's a massive business. Lords of Poverty documents it. Now, when I was growing up, the South African rand was twice the value of an American dollar. And by the way, the Rhodesian dollar was 3 times more. An American visitor to Rhodesia had to pay $3 to get 1 Rhodesian dollar. By 1994, because of sanctions, disinvestment, terrorism, campaigns against us, our rand had plummeted to 2 rand to the US dollar. Today it's 19 rand to the dollar. Our currency is being imploded. So I've got a $100 trillion note at our mission behind glass, but it's not worth anything. You couldn't even buy half a loaf of bread with it. And that's after they've taken 16 zeros off the currency, by the way. If anyone thinks that can't happen here, by the way, you're wrong. Socialists can do this. And that won't buy a loaf of bread. Wheelbarrow of money. Yeah. That's what socialism can achieve for you. Power failures, water restrictions, rampant crime, rape and murder are daily realities for the long-suffering people of South Africa. We are armed, and I would not even dream of going on a date with my wife without ensuring that the babysitter was combat trained and armed. Our babysitters had to be armed, and that should have been somebody who understood combat, close quarter combat training, and I would have normally trained people who'd be our babysitters. We would be irresponsible otherwise. To distract people from the disastrous failure and the catastrophic corruption of the ANC government, they've got lies, distortions, disinformation, fabrications, misleading statistics, campaigns of guilt manipulation, manufactured to create a smokescreen to cover the rampant corruption and the incompetence of the ANC. And you cannot even come close to exaggerating. And behind the ANC is the Southern Communist Party. The SA Communist Party controls the ANC, and their leaders are always SA Communist Party members. To enable the looting of the country, whites have been demonized, made scapegoats for every problem. Even after 31 years of ANC misrule, nothing is their fault. Whites are to blame for anything. So the minority, when I was born, whites were 32% of the population in South Africa. We're now 7%. We're like the leopards. We're an endangered species. So how can you say that's not a genocide when we are now a minority in our own country and getting less and less and less, and where most of the children of whites in South Africa have to go overseas to find work. They can't get employment in the country because they're too male or too pale. And you've got these genocidal maniacs screaming to kill the minority, to kill a farmer. Instead of addressing their failed policies, the ANC have continued to throw good money after bad, hell-bent on promoting immoral, unwise, counterproductive policies on every level. They're following exactly the catastrophic decolonization policy of Joseph Stalin in the Ukraine and the Soviet Union in the 1930s. When the Soviets, how many here would have read Animal Farm? Now that was a school textbook at Rhodesia. We read 1984 and Animal Farm, and very good textbooks because, you know, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. And Joseph Stalin and Vladimir Lenin are the inspiration for Animal Farm in so many ways, as was Trotsky. They burned entire forests to burn out the farmers who were fleeing there. They found the hidden stocks of grain that farmers were keeping to keep themselves alive during winter. In Kiev, people walked unconcernedly past people who were just dropping on the streets and dying of starvation in the middle of the Ukraine. The people died by the millions in the Ukraine. They called it the Holodomor. Massacres by the Soviets, hunger, despair, death in Ukraine. And this is documented. This is what the Soviets did in the Ukraine while the West was calling Stalin Uncle Joe. Millions perished in the Soviet famine. We now think the number's more like 11 million. But at the time they spoke about 6. And then I witnessed and documented the Rwandan Holocaust, 1994. A little mountainous nation in the middle of Africa where the gorillas are. I mean, I don't mean the gorillas carrying AK-47s, I mean the hairy gorillas. The cute, interesting gorillas, the nice gorillas. And Rwanda, they've got the mountains of the moon there, and it's a magnificent country today, but it was a hellhole back in 1994. And these Interahamwe mass murdering thugs mobilized the population with machetes. The Chinese brought 500,000 machetes into the country for this low-tech genocide. Machetes killed more people in Rwanda in 6 weeks than atomic bombs have in all of history. I mean, just think about that, low-tech genocide. I walked knee-deep in corpses in this church, Natarama Church. knee-deep in corpses, wading in blood sometimes, amongst a church with 1,200 dead bodies in it. You just can't believe the savagery of this. And this all started with songs about killing the Nyensis, killing the cockroaches. And the piles of skulls. You won't see bullet holes here, but you will see cracked skulls from people being bludgeoned with clubs. And then, interestingly, the West did nothing to help the Tutsi Christians, the Protestants who were being slaughtered. And you've got to read the book Shake Hands with the Devil by General Romeo Delia, the Canadian general in charge of the UN peacekeepers, to understand they did nothing to help the victims. They abandoned them. But when the Rwandese themselves rose up and the Tutsi chased out the Hutu mass murderers and they fled into neighboring Congo, suddenly France mobilized the Foreign Legion to come in, parachuted in, Operation Turquoise, and they created a cordon sanitaire where the mass murderers could flee to, and then they withdrew into the Congo with them so that the architects of the genocide, the mass murderers, could escape justice by fleeing to the Congo. And that, by the way, is the roots of the Congo violence that's going on right now too. And they got hordes of aid. As you can see, this is the gates of Parliament. You don't change governments in Africa by ballots, but by bullets. That, unfortunately, is the reality. I documented all this in my book, Holocaust in Rwanda, the roles of gun control. They first disarmed the people, the media manipulation, they lied. The liberal church leaders, some of the genocides were organized by church leaders, bishops, cardinals. And some of the architects of the genocide are living today in Canada and France. You know why? They speak French. So the French foreign minister was asked, why are you protecting the architects of the genocide? And his answer was, we are protecting Francophone Africa from Anglophone Africa. In other words, the genocidal Hutu mass murderers spoke French, and the Tutsi victims who were murdered spoke English. So that makes it okay, right? Now, I think Canada's signed the anti-genocide treaty, but they're protecting architects of the genocide in Canada to this day because they're French-speaking, so that makes it all right. And you think of the catastrophic so-called land reform policies of Zimbabwe. So the ANC wants to follow in the footsteps of failure from the Congo through the Soviet Union to Rwanda, removing constitutional protections on private ownership of property. And just to give a few examples, this is how it works. This is land reform in Zimbabwe. As you can see, much better. This is the way it should be, right? This is what they want. Martin Olds, the first victim, he was attacked and he killed 18 of the communist North Korean trained 5th Brigade who attacked his farm before he ran out of bullets. Gun control limited him to 200 rounds of ammunition. And he ran out of ammunition. They destroyed his farm, burned him out, and bashed him to death outside. But Martin Old's sacrifice in fighting to protect his farm, the first farm attacked on the 18th of April, year 2000, that meant the communists lost interest in storming farms because this guy was Grey Scouts. He was a cavalryman from the Rhodesian army, and he gave such a good account of himself. The ambulances were leaving in streams with all the wounded, but he caused such havoc with his 150 armed North Korean 5th Brigade who attacked him that they lost any interest in attacking Rhodesian farmers. And that will happen if they try to attack our farmers in South Africa. Our farmers shoot back. But on the left, you can see how evil it was back in days of Rhodesia. On the right, you can see the Zimbabwe land reform. And that's documented. This is what has happened in Zimbabwe. And the people of Zimbabwe get beaten up. These women were praying outside a government office. So they got beaten up by the police. This is the face of freedom in Zimbabwe. Boot on the neck, police dressed in battle gear, whipping them. That's a leather whip in a man's hands while others stand guard. And in South Africa, you've got the fat cat government corruption characters offering a shriveled up carrot to the long suffering voters who are pulling along a bunch of manure and land reform. And this, I think, demonstrates what you're talking about. Yes, you might hate the white South Africans, want to kick them in the back, but it's going to end up very badly for the ones who are trying to destabilize the balance of prosperity. And here you've got a little South Africa map asking, Do you have any food? No, but at least the land is mine. Burn down the farm, kill the cattle, destroy everything. But this is not driven by a sense for justice or to lift anyone up. It's just hatred and demon possession. My daughter had to deal with some of these characters at university. I'd never send my children to the secular universities, but she is up there for a ballroom dancing event, and the whole cancel culture event erupted in 2015, and she is in a Molly Blackburn hall in the centre of campus, and in came these EFF thugs with the red berets and red t-shirts, pulling the framed oil on canvas paintings off the wall to make a bonfire of them at the base of the Jamison Steps, centre of the university. And my daughter, who's got very strong legs, she's been climbing mountains and ice skating forever, Irish dancing and all this, she pushed him out the door, which is quite amazing. And she was outraged that the males didn't help her. She said the men, I said, correction, males. A man would have supported you. These males standing back are not real men. Not every male is a man, not every man is a gentleman. Just like not every female is a woman, not every woman is a lady. I mean, there's got to be standards. But she pushed them out and she said, Dad, they looked at me like they hated me. And I said, Daniela, they do hate you. She said, they looked at me like they were demon-possessed. Daniela, they are demon-possessed. I mean, you can't chant this zombie dance killing other people without being demon-possessed. She said, they looked like they wanted to murder me. And I said, Daniela, they do want to kill you. So I had within me this conflict. As a father, I was both proud of my daughter's courage and I was afraid for her safety, that she had risked her life to save some paintings. But she's an artist. I mean, it just makes sense. So this is the way these people, this is the end result of land reform. Starving people. It's happened in Ethiopia. It's happened all over Africa. And this is tragic. But this is the end result of greed and hatred and socialism, killing the farmer, chasing out the farmer, and then totally dependent on foreign aid. And Amos 5 says, hate evil, love good, establish justice in the gate. Let justice roll down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. We also told in Proverbs 3, do not be afraid of sudden terror, nor of the trouble from the wicked when it comes, for the Lord will be your confidence and will keep your foot from being caught. I've produced the book Security and Survival Handbook in order to help people, not just in farms, but also churches for security. One of our churches, St. James Church of England, was attacked by terrorists, 23rd of July 1993. They burst into the church, hurled hand grenades, opened fire with machine guns. One of our missionaries was there and he shot back with a snub-nosed revolver from the back of the church, a distance of about 25 feet, but he hit the terrorist at the door. The terrorists fled. They abandoned the attack. One man with one gun with 2 shots broke an attack and they fled. And it just shows armed citizens save lives. Disarmed citizens just become helpless victims. We've got to be able to defend our farms, our churches, our homes, and of course the farms are particularly under attack. It's a proven fact. Statistically, criminals commit less crime after they've been shot. And dead criminals have no recidivism rates. They don't return to crime. And one fact that most people may have missed is South Africa's got 650,000 war veterans who have actually fought a war and won against the Cubans and the Soviets in Angola. And a statistic I think many people miss is most farm attacks fail. There are 4 times more attacks on farms than farmers being killed, which means even though the terrorists have the advantage of surprise, they know when they can attack, you don't, and they always have the advantage of numbers, and they always have more weapons. Nevertheless, most attacks fail because our farmers are resilient, alert, and the farmers' wives are also resilient and armed and alert, and even the farmers' children are resilient and alert. When I've been in a farm visiting friends, as the sun starts to set, the tension rises. And everyone, even the young kids, have got their duties. And they're getting the fire extinguishers ready. They've got the sandbags by the windows because the terrorists don't just use bullets. They use rocket-propelled guns. You've got to be prepared for mortars, anything. They can't trust the cell phones. The cell phones are often jammed by cell phone jammers. They've got shortwave radios. They've got all kinds of alternative forms of communications, walkie-talkies and so on. And they lock down for war. The outer gates are locked. The inner gates and they've got the outside dogs and they've got the inside dogs, and they prepare for war. And this is every single night. The farmers are under attack. But the scripture says, do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, great and awesome. Fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses. And our people are training because when the day comes, you want to be fast and accurate. And lives depend on it. And a gun in the hand is worth more than the entire police force on the phone, especially when the police might have actually helped these terrorists do the attack. In many cases, the local police are complicit on the farm attacks. Now, you can get a lot of information on our mission, what we're doing, on our Frontline Mission SA.org website. We are a mission to the persecuted church. Most of my life, 43 years, I've been serving persecuted churches throughout Africa, and we believe in history. History is important. Socialism, as you know, is a pathway to ruin. We believe the only hope for our country is to turn away from race politics and hate, and we need to love one another, turn to God, humble ourselves and pray, seek his face, turn from our wicked ways. And our vision is to break away in a free and independent Cape of Good Hope. Where I live, southernmost point of Africa, is the only city astride two oceans. We've got the warm Indian Ocean, we've got the cold Atlantic Ocean, so we're the Cape of Storms, but that's not good for tourism, so we rather call it the Cape of Good Hope. And this city is a busy port city. We don't see why we should follow the socialism and chaos of the rest of the country, so we're wanting to be independent. And the scripture says we've got to appear before God and give an account for everything we've done, whether good or bad. So our mission has been working through Africa, helping persecuted churches, evangelizing, and I worked for the independence of South Sudan, and so I believe it's possible for us to have independence in the Cape. My experience in South Sudan helping these people to redraw the map and break away and secede from radical Islamic Sudan was successful. Back in 2011, South Sudan became the youngest country in Africa. And if you want to revolutionize your prayer life, you drive a soft-skinned vehicle in ambush alley where tanks didn't survive. That will improve your prayer life. And we've ministered in these war zones now. I've done 27 missions to Sudan and over 140 missions behind enemy lines. And we've distributed hundreds of thousands of Bibles and books across Africa. You want to fly the Christian flag because we don't like friendly fire. I wouldn't want someone to mistake me for a UN or an Arab, so we at least fly the Christian flag. Film evangelism is a great tool. These are just some of our outreaches. You can see South Sudan is now independent, but there's a place just north of South Sudan called the Nuba Mountains where they're still fighting an island of Christianity in a sea of Islam. And we've been strafed and rocketed, bombed. This picture is taken under fire. Mi-24 Hind helicopter gunship strafing, machine gunning our people on arrival in Sudan. That's what it would look like. Those rocket pods are deadly. And these are some people shot up by the terrorist attack. This woman lost her leg without anesthetic. Can you imagine having a leg amputated without anesthetic? But the leg was shredded by the helicopter gunship shooting up the people. And the people in the Nuba Mountains are fighting an island of Christianity against a sea of Islam. And we're smuggling in the Bibles, the books. You can see even the water containers. Every drop of water people need for cooking, washing, drinking, they've got to carry from the wells, which is down the valley. But they're living up in the mountains away from the Arab attacks. So they normally carry it in calabash pots, which can break and spill. So we've taken plastic screw cap jerry cans, which enable them to carry water without spilling or breaking. If they drop it, it's not going to spill the water. And that makes people's lives so much easier. Can you see the line of people? 250 porters coming up the mountain. They're carrying the box of Bibles, the books, the water containers, the blackboards that we bring for the schools, textbooks and so on. And these are all volunteers. They don't get paid for it. While the Arabs are burning the villages, Tamsit, poisoning the wells, crucifying the pastors. And so a lot of our work is slugging through the sweat. This is the Nuba Mountains, way behind enemy lines. Here's one of the victims of jihad. This man, James Kramer, 52 years old, had his arm cut off by the Arabs. And they burned his crops, they destroyed his village, they killed all of his goats and chickens, and they chopped off his arm so that he didn't join the resistance. Now, why would you want to join the resistance when you've got a government that understanding? And I saw, even more shocking, an evangelist without feet. How do you lose both your feet? Well, the Arabs axed off his feet at the ankles. Why'd they do that? Because he's an evangelist, to stop him preaching the gospel. But despite this man not having feet, which is very inconvenient, he walks on his knees, which you see are very calloused, or he rides on his donkey. And when you look at that, you wonder, what excuse do we have? You know, how beautiful on the mountains are the feet of him who brings good news. Well, film evangelism is great opportunity. We've shown films to people who've never seen a Christian film before, never seen any film before. It's good to get there before Hollywood. And these people had beautiful farms down in the valley, which have all been destroyed by the Arabs, but they've fled up the mountainside, and we fly in tons of Bibles. Our mission distributes an average of 200 tons of Bibles and books every year, totally free in about 100 languages around Africa. We just got about 28 tons delivered to our mission headquarters this afternoon. They still unpack it just before midnight, which it's already past midnight in Cape Town. And these are Bibles we're taking, flying behind enemy lines. Often we need mercenary pilots who will be willing to fly in no-fly zones, where it's you fly, you die. No-fly zone, helicopter gunships threaten to shoot us down. And so we need a special kind of pilot. They're normally ex-South African Air Force mercenaries who will fly for hire. And they've got to fly low under the radar to get in and to deliver these Bibles where it's illegal. This is the largest shipment of Bibles ever smuggled into an officially Islamic country. 9,700 Bibles and New Testaments in 8 different languages. And that Second World War vintage DC-3, I think you called them a C-47, did you? We call them DC-3s or Dakotas. That's what American airborne Screaming Eagles and so on were jumping out of at Normandy. And at the bridge too far, up in Netherlands. But it's turboprop conversion by the South African Air Force. I've jumped out of planes like this in Angola and Southwest Africa. South African Air Force was still using it. And that ambulance we bought and converted in South Africa, drove it up 4,000 kilometers to get to Sudan to be an ambulance at the border post. This is a Bible that we helped sponsor getting it printed. It was printed in Singapore, 10,000 copies. The first shipments of Bibles in the Moro language being delivered to the church that will not die. This church was the first church in Equatoria, been bombed and destroyed multiple times, 3 times destroyed, and rebuilt each time. And these are some of our friends in the Nuba Mountains and Moroland in southern Sudan. Just a short distance from this place, the translator who translated the Bible to Moro was shot and killed in an ambush with the Arabs back in 1991. And when I brought the Bibles to the very area where the Bible translator was killed, we were bombed on Sunday morning in a church service. We were running an evangelism explosion training course. James Kennedy had sent me a team, and as he said, never was an evangelism explosion clinic more appropriately named. We were bombed on Sunday morning. We'd been running this course for almost a week, and as I asked, if you were to die today, do you know for sure whether you'd go to heaven? And the cry went out, Antonos, and everyone dashed outside, and I was the last to get out. You can see the thatched roof comes down quite low. There's no actual doorway. You bend to go under, and the thatch deadens the sound. And as I stepped out from under the thatch, I could hear the screams of the bombs. It was so loud that I knew I didn't have time to look, to take another step, to reach the bomb shelter. I just had to lie flat. And as I hit the ground, the explosions ripped up huge pillars of fire. And I pulled out my camera, and I was getting some good combat pictures. And I got into such a combat mode, as I got to the end of this 35mm film, the film, when it got to the end, would start to rewind. It was long before digital. And this is 2001. And as I got to the end of the film, I immediately opened it to pull it out a new, like magazine, refill. And as I did it, I wiped out most of the pictures, which is tragic that you think about that in that time. I thought these are some of the best combat pictures I've ever got. But I was lying on my face there with the bombs going up, and everything that goes up comes down. And this was one of the bomb craters. Some of the shrapnel there are now paperweights and mementos at our mission house in Cape Town. But one of the bombs came straight through the tree, crashed through the tree, and buried itself in the ground before exploding, which was a miracle in itself, because if it had detonated in any of the branches, you'd have an airburst. Airburst, everyone dies. A ground burst, if you're lying flat, you've got a fair chance of surviving. Amazingly, the service continued after the bombing. In fact, we probably had more people after the church was bombed than we had before. We didn't lose anyone. 8 1,000-kilogram bombs landed in an area the size of a football field. And no one was killed, which is incredible. I was the only one injured. I had a few cracked ribs, which is nothing compared. But people came to see the Evangelism Explosion Clinic that was bombed, and the church that was bombed but still stood. Trees were knocked over. Trees were filled with shrapnel, but we weren't. And one of the commanders said, this happened to show the power of God. The Bibles of the Christians are more powerful than the bombs of the Muslims. And indeed they are. Another occasion, if this bomb had exploded, it would have taken the compound where we were meeting off the map and the church. But it didn't explode. And they dug it out, and I asked, why are you digging out an unexploded bomb? They said, we need the explosives to give back to the Arabs. It's more blessed to give than to receive. And Jesus said, on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Christ's church is being bombed and attacked and burned all over the world. Just in a 5-year period, 1,000 churches in Nigeria were attacked. 17,000 Christians killed in 5 years in northern Nigeria just from Boko Haram terrorists. The church is under attack in many parts of the world, but Jesus Christ is building his church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Now, our mission is a Bible and literature mission. We get tons of Bibles and books donated to us. We print a lot. That's Rondebosch Common. Our mission looks out over it, and we run around that common regularly for training. And we drive across the frontiers, towing tons of Bibles and books. That trailer can take about 3 tons of Bibles and books. And in the end, we're walking, showing the films, and ministering to people in the field, including in the Congo, Nigeria, Mozambique, Angola, Rwanda, training chaplains, Bibles and Bikes programs. Let's open up for questions. Anybody got any questions? I've been giving a bit of an introduction. I knew I had to tackle some of the South African farm threats, but that's not what our mission does most of the time. We live in South Africa, we're based in South Africa, but we're very Africa-faced. I've got some literature at the back. I've got clipboard if you want to be on a mailing list, and newsletters that are free for you to take. Questions? Yes?
I had a question at the beginning when you were talking, what's the state of the church in South Africa? Like, what's the resistance?
Well, there's some resistance. We're part of the resistance, but I'm afraid to say a lot of the people are gaslighted, Stockholm syndromed, and they feel like, well, our lives depend on these criminals who are running it. So they want to believe the propaganda, and that actually the kidnappers who say they want to murder them aren't really. So I'd say gaslighting and Stockholm syndromes most of the church. But we've got some strong churches, some real backbone type churches who make a stand. They're the minority. We saw during the lockdown lunacy, the masquerade madness, the salvation by vaccination COVID cult. Most churches shut down because they were told to. Our mission kept operating, and we had illegal worship services every Sunday. Because the abortion clinics could be open, the casinos could be open, but not the churches. And we said, no, not acceptable. The church operated through the bubonic plague. We're not going to stop for the flu. So we kept meeting. But yeah, I'm sorry to say that most of our churches compromise and are cowardly. Sorry to say. But then we have some very, very, very strong churches. But they are the exception. We try to provide libraries for pastors throughout Africa. And the Congo, these are all French books. You may be surprised to know most of the people in Africa speak a European language as their second language. Arabic in the 7 northern countries in the north of Africa. English in 23 countries in Africa is the official language. French is the official language in 21 countries, including Congo. Portuguese is the official language in 5 countries. So with French, Portuguese, English, and Arabic, you can reach most people in Africa. Although people still prefer Bible in their own language, of course. But it just shows you, you can go a long way in Africa just with English, in this case, French. And so we've got a missionary in the Congo, in one of the most unreached parts of Earth. Congo River has got 18 million people living on it who cannot be reached by road. They can only be reached by boat because they're on the Congo River basin, which is phenomenal rainforest, so many tributaries. There are no roads going in there. You can only go by river. And it's a tough place, and there's a lot of diseases, the original heart of darkness. But our missionary there, who's a man about my age too, he's in his 60s, and he's a naval captain. He's running the Congo River mission, trying to reach these people, and you won't believe how hard it is to get volunteers. And most people would prefer to be called to Kenya than to be called to Congo. Kenya's got a nice system. They've got, infrastructure, hotels, restaurants, and so on, plumbing, electricity. The Congo's got nothing but diseases and violence and so on. But those are the sort of place we've got to go. So the Lord is building his church, and our biggest challenge in Africa is Bibles. Here's a mind-blowing statistic. We have in Africa right now 680 million Christians in Africa, officially, according to Operation World, of which 500 million don't have a Bible yet. We only have 150 million Bibles or New Testaments in Africa, and we've got 680 million Christians. And the problem is about to double. It's a good problem. The church is about to double. In the next 25 years, the church is going to increase to 1.2 billion people. Africa is going to be the most Christian continent on earth, numbers-wise, by 2050. But they need Bibles. The church is growing faster than we can provide Bibles. If you hear that Frontline Fellowship's distributing 200 tons of Bibles and books a year, you'd think that's great. But it's a drop in the ocean. The need is colossal. It's not enough. We've got to do more. And we need more Bible teaching. Most pastors in Africa have no Bible training. Most pastors in Africa don't have a full Bible. About 70% only have New Testaments. And, it's hard to be a pastor at the best of times, even with a good library. But if you don't have a study Bible, you don't have access to a library. That's why we take in libraries for pastors. We take in study Bibles. We're trying to help. And one of our best friends was Dr. R.C. Sproul. He gave us 2,200 Reformation study Bibles to distribute free around Africa. What a, planting those in people's hands. You can't imagine how much impact that can have with people who have nothing. So we've got to get a lot more Bibles, a lot more Bible teaching into Africa. And so that's our challenge. And you can go on our website and find lots of audio, video. And my book, Frontline Behind Enemy Lines for Christ, is over 400 pages. There's more than 480 pictures in it. There's lots of maps and charts. It gives you an understanding of Africa from a very politically incorrect perspective. Starting with the war in Rhodesia, going through the Southwest African Angolan War. I've ministered in 38 countries. I've been involved in 8 different wars. And this has got the prison experiences, the bombings, the different experiences we've had under fire. And it includes some of the work behind the Iron Curtain, which brought down the Iron Curtain and the Berlin Wall. One of my biggest projects was preaching through every book in the Bible. To help African churches become more biblical, I summarized every book in the Bible, from Genesis through to Revelation, and produced the Old Testament survey and New Testament survey that's there. And along with the Biblical Preaching Handbook, we're trying to get these into the hands of pastors throughout Africa. We need examples of excellence, a great cloud of witnesses. And the 19th century missionary movement produced some of the most phenomenal missionaries. So I've got 19 biographies in the 19th century of missions, Great Century Missions book, which is a lot of examples of excellence, like Mary Slessor, David Livingstone, William Carey. Islam is our biggest enemy, threat, and mission field. So I wrote this book on slavery, terrorism, Islam, which got me death threat fatwas for saying that Islam was violent and intolerant. So to prove me wrong, they gave me death threats. and bombed me. It's a good thing they're peaceful and tolerant. Imagine if they were violent. So we've got a lot of books. I've got a few on the table and many others available as e-books, or you can order online. Any other questions, comments, complaints? Yes, so in Sudan, I've been bombed a few times. I've come under artillery and rocket fire. But back in 2002, I had a very serious experience, which is the chapter arrested in Yei in the Frontline book. And I was under arrest in what they call a tukul. In other words, it's a thatched roof, bit of mud and branches around you, and you're in a small compound that's surrounded by small wooden poles and stakes. So it's not a very secure compound, but that was where I was imprisoned and told you're going to be shot in the morning, and firing squad waiting for us, and all of that. And we had access still to our shortwave radio, and we called for Missionary Aviation Fellowship to come and extract us. Had nothing to lose. I mean, they're going to shoot you in the morning anyway, so we might as well escape. But the trouble was, how are we going to escape? They're going to see us and shoot us. Well, that night, torrential monsoon rain began. Torrential, like you can't see a meter in front of you. That kind of torrential. And so I think you might get that in Florida sometimes. So this rain came. Well, that's great, but how's the plane going to land? We need to get out, and the planes aren't landing on tarmac. They're landing on dirt airstrips, so that's not very good, is it? So that night, of course, we're praying. I don't think there was any sleep, because they even said they'll probably come and throw phosphorus grenades into your thatched house and burn you out before the morning, because the hatred for us was so intense, all these things. So we're praying. Well, we escaped through the roadblocks because of the torrential rain. But then we come to the airstrip, and you're thinking, how is the plane going to land? I mean, we can't even see in front of us. And as we drove onto the airstrip, it was like clear. There's walls of water on two sides, walls of water, but the airstrip was clear. Now, there were puddles of rain water in the airstrip, but the MAF Cessna aircraft banked out of the clouds, came down and taxied straight down, and huge sprays of water going up above the wings as it went through some of the puddles. It taxis down, turns around, and the bishop and I, who were both sentenced to death, escape onto this plane. We fly out in the clear. Of course, we're then back in the rain very soon, but that's okay. The point is they had to have clear visibility for landing. And so that was just one escape. And I can believe Moses took the children of Israel between walls of water on both sides, because God freed us that way too. I mean, that was one of the most amazing experiences. I also should say, when I was in Nuba Mountains, I was bitten by a scorpion in my left hand. And you get the big scorpions with the big clippers and the small tail. They're not too bad. You can survive them easily. That's a minor poison. But I had these translucent, almost, they're not just pale, you can almost see through them, with the small clippers and a big tail. Now, they're deadly. And one of them bit me on the hand. And I could feel the poison coming up my arm, heading towards my heart. And I knew I've got minutes to live. Now, even if we had an aircraft, which we didn't, we were hours away from the nearest hospital. So all I could do was James 5. Call the elders to pray. Call the missionaries and pass around. Pray for me. They laid hands. They prayed the prayer of faith. And as they prayed, I felt the poison move away from my heart, down my arm, out the fingertips. Extraordinary. I mean, I've seen God's healing before, but this was one of the most dramatic possible. We don't do James 5 enough. If any of you are sick, call the elders. Pray the prayer of faith. And God answered those prayers. I mean, it's just remarkable. Obviously, God had some more work to do. A lot of great things you can say about Uganda, including the guerrillas in the midst. And Museveni's government has done quite a lot. Uganda went through another Holocaust. That was Idi Amin's Holocaust. The Ugandan Holocaust needs to be known too. Over 600,000 Christians murdered by Idi Amin, who is an Islamic lunatic. King Faisal of Saudi Arabia gave him a sword and said, with this sword, kill the enemies of Islam. And he did. He shot the Archbishop personally, and he snacked on his brains. He literally had his liver and brains and so on kept in the fridge, and he used to go and snack at night on the Archbishop. He's a cannibal. Idi Amin. I don't know how many people know this bizarre things, but I tell you, Africa is the most interesting continent. I grew up feeling sorry for poor kids who were born in America and Britain and Australia. I thought, these poor kids, how boring to be born in countries like that. I as a youngster, I remember thinking, what a privilege. I mean, I suppose not everyone can have the privilege of growing up in Rhodesia, but we've got the biggest animals in the world, the elephants. We've got the tallest animals in the world, the giraffes. We've got the fastest animals in the world, the cheetahs. We've got the most amazing animals in Africa. I could see them, and even had a lion as a pet, and I had a bush baby as a pet, or as a mascot when we were in the army, and hitchhiked around the country with this bush baby in my pocket. And just, Africa gets in your blood. When you've seen the sunsets in Africa and you've experienced Africa, everything else is boring. So I just praise God for Africa, and I wouldn't want my children to grow up anywhere else. Now, it's a dangerous continent, fair enough, and a lot of things that can kill you, but it's not boring, that's for sure.